BBC News with Sue Montgomery. A jury in New York has found that Donald Trump sexually abused the magazine writer E. Jean Carroll and defamed her by lying about it. After deliberating for less than 3 hours at the end of a 2-week civil trial, they awarded Ms. Carroll $5 million in damages. Her more serious accusation of rape was rejected. Ms. Carroll said the verdict was a victory for every woman who had suffered because she was not believed. Our correspondent, Neda Tawfiq, says that although many of Mr. Trump's supporters won't be swayed by this verdict, it's not a good situation for him.
Now you have a situation where Donald Trump will be branded as somebody who has been found liable of sexual abuse forever on the campaign trail now. I mean, you can bet that his challengers will be hammering this point, especially trying to appeal to women.
Mr. Trump has described the verdict as a disgrace. A spokesman said he would appeal. It's one of a series of lawsuits the former president is facing, including inciting the Capitol riots and trying to fix the result of the 2020 election. Mr. Trump did not attend the 2-week trial, though he gave a sworn deposition. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that any escalation from Palestinian militant groups in Gaza will be met with a crushing response. Israeli airstrikes killed 15 people on Tuesday. Yolande Nell reports.
Smoke could be seen rising from a burning car after an Israeli airstrike in southern Gaza. The Israeli military said the 2 killed were militants planning to fire anti-tank missiles, but Islamic Jihad has denied the pair were members of its group. Earlier, a military spokesman said precise strikes were launched overnight to target 3 Islamic Jihad commanders, but acknowledged that those killed also included relatives of the militants, as well as a doctor and his family living close to one of the men.
Supporters of the former Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan have called for nationwide protests following his arrest and corruption charges. His party has urged people to gather at the judicial complex in Islamabad on Wednesday. Supporters of Mr. Khan, like this woman, were angry at developments.
I don't know. Whatever. Let there be anarchy. Let there be chaos. If there is no Imran, there is nothing left in Pakistan.
Clashes erupted between Mr. Khan's followers and security forces. 1 person was killed. Residents of the Sudanese capital Khartoum have reported a series of airstrikes in the centre of the city. One of the 2 warring parties, the Rapid Support Forces, said these had targeted the presidential palace, which had been destroyed. There's been no independent confirmation. The Sudanese armed forces have denied the claim. BBC News. 2 worshippers and 2 security guards have been killed in an attack near a synagogue on the Tunisian island of Djerba. The Interior Ministry said a guard at a nearby naval station shot dead a colleague before heading towards the synagogue and opening fire. He was killed in the exchange. 9 others were injured. The attack came during an annual pilgrimage to the island, which draws Jewish visitors from Europe and Israel. President Biden has said the threat of a default should be taken off the table after inconclusive talks with congressional leaders on raising the U.S. debt ceiling. Mr. Biden said he remained optimistic the deadlock over government borrowing could be resolved. But the Republican House leader, Kevin McCarthy, said there had to be spending cuts before any deal could be made. Our correspondent, Nomia Iqbal, says a default would be ruinous.
The Republicans want to use the threat of default to try and get policy concessions out of President Biden, particularly on spending cuts, whereas the president said, look, I'm happy to talk about cuts, but I don't want to tie it to the debt ceiling. But they have to come to an agreement at some point. June the 1st is the deadline. If they don't, the US will default. It's the first time that would ever happen, and it would be economically catastrophic.
Search teams in New Zealand have found a body in the cave system where a schoolboy went missing while on an outdoor pursuits course. Parents have questioned why the school trip was allowed to go ahead despite recent heavy rain. A woman from the American state of Utah who wrote a book about grief after the death of her husband has been charged with his murder. A medical examiner confirmed that Eric Richens had died from an overdose of the prescription painkiller fentanyl. Court documents say his wife, Corey Richens, had acquired several doses of the opioid from a drug dealer shortly before her husband died. BBC News.